West Asia is on the knife's edge. Recent days have seen an escalation on all fronts. One miscalculation, one mistake can lead to the unthinkable. A full-scale regional conflict is a rocket attack on Israel's Golan Heights. That one mistake. Israel's Foreign Minister Israel Katz believes so. Blaming Hezbollah for the attack, Katz has said that Iran-backed militant group has crossed the line this time. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has cut short his trip to the U.S. He has made it clear that Israel won't let the incident pass in silence and said that Hezbollah will have to pay a heavy price. As per figures cited by Israeli Defense Forces in Hezbollah's aggression since October 7th, 22 Israeli soldiers, 23 civilians have been killed. However, during the same duration, over 100 civilians have been killed in Israeli strikes in Lebanon. On Saturday, 4 were killed in a strike on the southeastern village of Kafakila. The killed were affiliated with different armed groups, with at least one of them belonging to Hezbollah. Hassan Nasrallah, Secretary General of the militant group, has said that it would end its attack if there was a ceasefire deal in Gaza. Similarly, Yemen's Houthi rebels have urged Israel to end its military campaign in the Strip and lift the siege of the Palestinian enclave, failing which, that they say, will launch an open war against the country. In an attack by an Iranian-made drone on Tel Aviv earlier this month, one person was killed and at least 10 wounded. Over 39,000 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since the war began. Egyptian, Qatari, and United States mediators are to meet Israeli negotiators in Rome today for a discussion on the hostages for ceasefire deal. But as Israel even wants peace, the Netanyahu-led country continues its operations in Gaza. On Saturday, at least 30 people were killed and over 100 others injured after an Israeli airstrike hit a school housing displaced people in Deir al-Balah. We're now being joined by Heino Kling from Washington, D.C. He's a former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia. He is now joining us. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening.
Now, Netanyahu has stated that Israel is ready to strike. Lebanon has condemned the attack, and Hezbollah has not taken responsibility yet, although they took responsibility for an attack just 3 kilometers from the football ground. This is one of the multi-front battle Israel is engaged in. Do you think this is the most serious escalation between the Israelis and Hezbollah?
Certainly in recent weeks it is. I think what makes this attack particularly escalatory is that it was a purely civilian target. Only civilians were killed, and quite candidly, the fact that those that were killed were mostly children and teenagers makes it particularly heinous. I do anticipate the Israelis will respond forcefully. I think we've got a taste of that last week after the Houthi attack in Tel Aviv that you mentioned previously. I think that the Israelis will demonstrate that they're resolute when it comes to defending their people and their territory.
Right, now, you have advised and implemented U.S. defense policies in more than 20 countries and territories. How do you think the U.S. will act?
I believe that the Biden administration will counsel Prime Minister Netanyahu to use restraint and not to escalate the situation to a point where the Israelis can no longer control what happens. I think we got a taste of that after the Iranian attack on Israel, the unprecedented strikes of missiles and drones that resulted in an American-led effort to intercept the vast majority of them. However, President Biden, I think, is going to have some pressure domestically, both on the left and on the right, to take a variety of steps. I just not sure that he's going to be particularly successful in trying to rein in Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Now, the U.S., Egypt, Qatar, and Israel are scheduled to meet in Italy to discuss the ongoing hostage and ceasefire deal. How do you think this attack will now impact the ceasefire deal?
Well, it certainly presents an additional challenge. I would even question the timing of this attack, because On the heels of Prime Minister Netanyahu's time in the United States, he spent the last several days here meeting both with President Biden and Vice President Harris, as well as former President Trump. It appeared as if there was some guarded optimism that we were on the cusp of a potential temporary ceasefire that would lead to the release of some of the hostages that Hamas has held since October 7th. I think this attack by Hezbollah, whether by design or not, is going to make those negotiations even more challenging. And I would anticipate that while those negotiations are going on, the Israeli Defense Forces will launch a counterstrike against Hezbollah in Lebanon.
Now, you mentioned that this comes, but Hezbollah, they have promised that, we will not attack if the ceasefire deal does come to an end. Why do you think they chose this time when there could have been a potential ceasefire deal if Netanyahu was in the U.S.?
Well, first of all, I don't necessarily take terrorist organizations at their word. Hezbollah has launched attacks against Israel prior to the October 7th Hamas massacres. So this is not just related to the October 7th attacks and Israeli counteroffensive into Gaza. It is, in fact, an interesting question. Why would these attacks be going on now? Because conventional wisdom would show that it would put these negotiations at risk. I think history will tell us whether or not, again, this was by design to thwart these negotiations and perhaps not have a ceasefire and not have a cessation of hostilities. We have to remember that the common denominator with Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis is the regime in Tehran. And I think the regime in Tehran is not in favor of peace amongst Israel and its neighbors.
Right. Thank you so much for giving your insights and joining us on the show.
Thank you.